Um,
So welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. We're going to give you a kind of an overview of how to onboard. And my name is Judith Redmond. I work with California Farm Link, teaching a class about how to be a great employer. And I'm also a co-founder of Full Belly Farm, which is a diversified vegetable, fruit, nut, and eggs and meat farm in Yolo County, Northern California. So happy to be here.
Hi, my name's Crystal Jensen. I am currently a HR generalist at California Farm Link. I do have a ag degree from UCSC and have been in HR and did onboarding for a small farm here in Santa Cruz. Um, and and yeah, that's me.
And I'm Courtney Melblom. I own a small business called Farmer Made Flowers, and I'm zooming in from San Luis Obispo County. And I don't work for FarmLink. I just have taken a few of the classes, which I can't recommend highly enough. The Resilierator and the Employment Resilierator are where I learned so much about being a great employer. And I am speaking as kind of like a newer perspective on hiring, and honored to stand beside Judith and Crystal, who are both just such a wealth of knowledge. And yeah, Full Belly Farm is like the gold standard of farm employment, and FarmLink is like a great way to learn how to get there. So I'm pleased to be here, and thanks for having us all.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Yeah, so like I said, we're gonna basically do a little bit about some of the things worth paying attention to when you're onboarding new employees, and talk about really just mostly the first few days. I'm going to do a deep dive into I-9s, and I'll tell you a little more about why I want to do that when I get to that section. Onboarding best practices. And a lot of this isn't really just about the mechanics and practicalities of onboarding. It's about creating a really great, healthy work culture, because that's what we really need for many reasons beyond the first few weeks of a person's employment. And then at the end, you'll see there's some slides that are resources. And those resources mostly put together by Crystal, which it was really wonderful. They're some of the main reason that I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this presentation, because they Crystal has put together a lot of the things that you will need. If you just download them, you'll kind of be ready to get started. And that the slides are going to be, they're already available on Shed, so you can, the links are right there, so you'll have them, all of those resources at the end that we show you at the end, they're all available to you. So next slide.
Whoops. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, this is a funny slide that I put it in here because there's people who think a lot about sort of low wage employment and how to advocate for making those jobs really positive. And I, having been a member partner at Full Belly Farm for many decades, kind of became really aware that the press, if you look at the sustainable agriculture press, or really just the press in general, they characterize agricultural work as kind of the bottom in some ways. They're always all these adjectives about how it's backbreaking and low wage and this and that. And so I put this slide here because I think if you look at it, you'll see that there's a lot of things that might look as if they're kind of out of reach in agriculture. Things like the benefits, maybe broadly available benefits or advancement pathways or wealth building opportunities. That's some of the things in these bullets. But if you look at it again, you'll see that actually there's a lot of things in here that don't rely on you being a really profitable business with a lot of discretionary funds. Things like a fair and reliable schedule. for your employees, organizational culture that supports a sense of belonging and purpose. There's a lot of things that people have found that agricultural employees need and want in order to feel really positive about their work that are under your control and that you can achieve with some attention to making your workplace really positive. So that's why I always like to start with this slide, because we are here to help you make the work environment as positive as possible for your employees, because we think that that's going to end up actually benefiting your job and benefiting your workplace and making it more profitable. So yeah, the next slide.
This is where I will take over. Thanks, Judith. So I believe that onboarding is the most important part of an employee life cycle. And then when I say employee life cycle, that's, from kind of recruitment to them, leaving your company. So I do believe that this is really the most important part. It can have such a huge impact on the rest of their time with you. It doesn't have to be complicated or perfect. It just has to be intentional. Um, Being prepared before bringing on new staff can save a lot of time. It can avoid, real costly mistakes. And it can, I think more importantly, it builds trust with that new hire, which helps create a really strong relationship um, with your employees. So the main, onboarding typically fulfills these, several essential functions. So first, it ensures basic compliance with regulations and policies. So that's kind of your legal foundation. Second, it provides training and on safety, all your work procedures and expectations of the role. This is especially important in ag where work is physically demanding and where the conditions are changing constantly. Third, it introduces employees to the work culture, to your values, and to the business's history. This helps people understand not just what to do, but how and why things are done the way that they are. I think that kind of helps build this connection, which is really important. And so it's not just a job. That's kind of why I feel like it's really important. And finally, it helps employees start building relationships at work and to find their place on the team. This piece is usually overlooked, but it makes a big difference in retention and morale. So onboarding is more than just the first day. It's kind of a process that unfolds over a period of time, usually kind of within the first month. On day one, the focus is usually required on documentation, introductions, basic safety training, and basic work procedures. During the first week, it's really important to check in with them before the end of that first week on how things are going, revisiting safety and work procedures, see if they have any questions, and to kind of go over employee policies. And then by the end of the first month, onboarding should include completing any of the remaining trainings and evaluating how the employee is learning and performing. Most issues, if any, show up later in the employee's life cycle. Safety, for example, safety incidences, performance problems, or any misunderstandings, they often trace back to rushing through this process. So it's really important to be, take this slow, be intentional and thorough. And again, you don't need to do all of this perfectly, but having short check-ins with both the employee and their manager can really make a big difference. So what absolutely has to get done on day one? The first day of work is important for not only for them to feel comfortable and to understand what to expect from the company, but all new employees should receive the same basic information. So I would set aside time for the new hire to meet with their new supervisor and anyone who will be training them. and then review key parts of the employee handbook to ensure that, they don't have any questions and yeah, just make sure they don't have any questions. So the the basics are, definitely going over their, making sure that they understand what the job they are being hired to do, which is basically just going over their job description, making sure that you review the whole thing with them and they understand what is expected of them. Making sure that they have been introduced to their supervisor and whoever is training them, what their pay is. There is a required notice. It's called Notice to Employees, Labor Code Section 2810.5. That lays out all of their pay information and workers' comp information, and then that usually is filled out on hire, and then anytime they have a pay change. You show that to them, but then it typically gets filed in their employee file. They should also clearly understand their daily work schedule, so including the time that they should arrive, when their scheduled breaks are, their lunch, as well as what the overtime policies are and paid days off, like paid holidays. Um, and again, consistency here really matters. It helps ensure that there's equity across the board and protects employees if anything comes up later. I always recommend creating kind of a one-page document that has a lot of these important details on them. A lot of them are covered in, the handbook, but I think having the schedule, when their breaks typically are and things like that is good to just give them so they can, so there's just less questions later. Other things to cover on day one. In California, employees are entitled to uninterrupted meal breaks and paid rest periods. It's important to explain how those work within your business. Um, you should also explain what meal premiums are and why it's important to avoid them. Paid sick leave is also required, so making sure that they understand how much time they have available, how to request it, and um, what qualifies as paid sick time. And yeah, like I said before, all of this should be covered in the employee handbook, but it's really good to review again on day one. Most people do not read the handbook, so make sure that they have a copy and they sign an acknowledgement page, but I would review some of these really important ones on the first day. I think this is probably the most important part of onboarding, at least for me. It's the easiest way to keep organized. An onboarding checklist. It not only has all of their information, but it includes, all the required documents, I-9, W-4, the DE-4, workers' comp notices, CalSavers, paid family leave, just anything that is kind of a requirement or that you need to make sure that is covered during the onboarding. This is for you, by the way. It's not really something that you share with the employee. It's really for you to make sure that you get everything done and kind of checked off. I can't remember if we have a copy of this in the thing, but you can find a lot of templates from these online. It's really good to have this ready, especially because when you're onboarding, it's usually a busy season or not a good time usually. So just have it ready. It can be really, really helpful. Some other resources here's a link to Notice to Employees, workers' comp time of hire, CalSavers, the paid family leave forms. The EDD is a great resource for a lot of these. If you're looking for things online, make sure it's coming from a reliable source like the EDD. And another really important part is making sure that you prepare these packets in advance. I usually have the onboarding checklist as the first page, um, and then everything else kind of back behind that. Being prepared like this just helps day one feel a little bit more calmer, more organized for both of you. Um, your onboarding packet will include physical copies of some things like documents and some policies, but a lot of payroll programs will handle the, certain forms like tax forms, the W-4, the DE-4, and sometimes even the I-9. Um, but they don't replace, your responsibility as the employer to ensure that they are completed and completed correctly and to explain certain programs and notices to employees. One common thing I've noticed is a lot of people don't know how to fill out tax forms. You can't help them fill those out because you're not a tax specialist, but you can ensure that they're filled out correctly. Some people will put I'm exempt when they're not actually exempt from taxes. So it's important to review. If you see any issues with them, I would refer them to a tax specialist or to have them review it again and complete it. And then also most of these documents are available in both English and Spanish and sometimes other languages. It's really important that you offer it in the language, their primary language, to ensure that they understand what they're actually receiving. Um, I've always, when I've had both English and Spanish employees, I've had two different packets, an English packet when the onboarding checklist, is either in Spanish or English, and then the Spanish packet. So you have two there ready to go. So you're not having to print things out or anything like that or translate things in the moment. Um, so that could be really helpful as well. And then once all this paperwork is complete, your focus can then return to back to the employee, helping them build the skills that they need to do their job, making sure that they're safe and building those connections that you want. Um, Now time for any questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions, you can just put them in the chat. Any questions for you have a HR specialist here that you can
Um,
ask questions to. Those of you who are
somebody,
employers.
somebody just said this is already making me realize how badly I got um, screwed in my first ag job. Yeah. Well, and I think the reason for this is to keep that from happening to your employees.
Yeah. I think a lot of farmers when they first get employees or even when they've had employees for a while are busy keeping their businesses running, doing what it takes to run a small business, and they may
Mhm.
not have time to be thinking about all of this stuff. So that's why we're making it part of the small farm conference. And the presentation has been uploaded to Shed. So um, that's where you see that's the how you're getting onto this conference. That's the portal, the conference portal, and that this presentation is available to all of you.
What is the size of farm at which this becomes relevant? It depends. Well, onboarding in general, I think it is relevant for any size farm. If you're onboarding anybody, you should have you know, some structure. Some things like, I think I'm going to go over a few things later, but some certain like policies or things are required at one employee. Some are required after 10 employees. It kind of just depends on what it is you're talking about.
Yeah, I think at whatever size you're at, even if there aren't any employees yet, just knowing like what you'll need to do and having a packet ready, even if you feel like you have your crew and everything's great, like life happens and sometimes it's the middle of the season and you need to bring someone on new. So just having something already printed and ready to go is really helpful. It's definitely helped me out in a pinch.
Yeah. Yeah, Angela, hopefully this will help you at least create a list of the more important things that are, required, and then um and then you can hopefully build from there.
Yeah, there's like the compliance side of it, which Crystal has provided all kinds of resources that we linked at the end of this presentation. But there's also more than that. It's like if you're doing this, I think Courtney's going to talk a lot in her presentation about creating a culture, and onboarding is a
Yeah.
big part of that. But I think just in response to Angela's question, that the more just putting a little focus and structure into the employee experience will really, really help a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think like creating there's a question there about a template for an employee handbook and I didn't find one, but I think it's always going to be different. Like it's always going to be specific to every business, but that checklist, like that onboarding checklist is a place to start as far as like a framework for things you need to cover. And then I ended up working with an HR consultant from the Small Business Development Center, which is a nationwide nonprofit that probably has a branch in your area. And if not, you might be able to meet with someone remotely from a nearby region, which is pretty much what I did, even though there is someone locally, and made an employee handbook that I then had vetted. And so I feel like that as far as like the culture or just like when it becomes important or when you use it, it's like just defining your relationship as your employer with your employees and it just sets the tone and kind of covers all the bases. It feels like um a good place to start.
Yeah. And I think we have, Judith, don't we have a couple examples? Did we add that to our
We
resources,
don't have, we didn't, we ended up not including the examples or templates of
the handbook?
employee handbooks, mainly because they change every year.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, sometimes you do have to do a little bit of your own research, but I think the process that Courtney just described is really a good one. I mean, you don't want to have all kinds of policies in your employee handbook that you didn't create yourself that maybe aren't appropriate for your setting in your business. So, you just start with maybe these onboarding materials that tell about rest breaks and the schedule and
Mhm.
the supervisor, the safety program, those kinds of basic things, and maybe build from there.
Yeah. And
There,
yeah,
there,
there's a handful of, simple required California. I mean, if, yeah, in California laws that are important to have. And I think if you can find somebody to possibly review what you have created, um, it can be really helpful. But I would just start with kind of, like we said, those simple, the stuff that's kind of in our checklist, and those easy things, and just kind of build from there.
I
I think
might do
another
my, yeah,
thing
go on.
to include, sorry, Judith, is just what uh how do I say this? Um, what would be grounds for termination? So that's in writing and it can be a little broad, but that way, if hopefully it never happens, but you do have to terminate someone with cause, then you have already addressed it when they were first hired with like what's not tolerated at your
Yeah.
workplace.
Yeah, you can have a section in there regarding kind of corrective, or corrective action is a term used, and kind of what the process is. And yeah, it's
So I'm gonna do a quick and dirty dive into I-9s right now. The I-9 is a document that you're going to need to fill out for every single employee um, that you have. And what it does is it verifies their identity so that they are the person they say they are and their eligibility for employment. Um, and if you have a payroll program, you may feel like maybe it's taking care of the I-9 compliance and automating it. But the fact is that a lot of times it's not complete. And there are many, many ways in which I-9s can be full of errors. And if you were audited for your I-9s, it would be you that would end up being responsible and having to pay the fines, not your payroll program. So even though it may seem at first like a simple document, it actually has hundreds of pages of instructions associated with it and many opportunities for error. And one of the reasons that we decided to spend just 5 or 10 minutes on this particular subject during an onboarding conversation was that we're hoping that any of you out there who are employers will think about doing an audit of your I-9s internally, because I-9 audits are increasing dramatically. In 2024, there were 230 I-9 audits, but in 2025, there were 5,200. So the number of, and they're expecting that it's going to exponentially continue to increase with all of the many, many dollars of our taxpayer money that are being plowed into ICE. So this is actually a very important subject for all of us right now. And that's why I'm going to be talking briefly about it. So we want you to use an up-to-date version. They do update them regularly. There's a new one this year. And there's 2 sections, one for the employee to fill out and one for the employer to fill out. And both sections have to be signed by the employer or the employee. And most people recommend that you keep these forms, because I-9 audits do happen and for other reasons, keep these forms separate from all your other personnel records. So here is the first part of section 1, very straightforward. Name, address, phone number, date of birth, social security number, pretty straightforward. Might be interested to know that this is the part for the employee, and they do not actually have to put down their social security number or their email address, unless the business is participating in E-Verify. And you will want to review this section 1 for a number of reasons, to make sure it's complete and to make sure that the information here is cross-checks with the information that you see when you look at the documents that the employee provides. Here's the rest of section 1. Here's where the employee puts down if they're a citizen or if they're a non-citizen. A non-citizen national is not very common. It's someone from American Samoa or Swains Island. Or they might be a lawful permanent resident. That would be a green card holder, and in which case they'd enter a number, their A number, or they might be someone who has a work visa. And in that case, it's going to have an expiration date. So they're going to put this information down, and you're probably going to look at these documents later and just sort of cross-check them. Notice that there is a date there. And that's very important, because that date cannot be any later than the first date that the person was hired. Okay. This is the next part, the section 2. This is the part that you, as the employer, fills out. Notice that there's 3 columns. There's column A, which is documents that we'll go through it, but there's column A that shows both their identity and their eligibility to work in the United States with one document. And if not A, if you don't have a document like that, you'll probably need to fill out list B or list C. List B showing their identity, list C showing their eligibility for employment. And I don't know if you can see this if you're using a phone or a small screen, but there are 2 places for dates. One shows the first date of employment, and remember that was also on section 1, and the other one shows today's date. And there's a list of all the documents that are compliant, the list of documents that you can use to fill out these sections. For example, list A would be things like a passport or a green card. Those show both the identity and the eligibility for employment. And there's a list, as I said, that comes with the I-9 saying what documents you can use. List B would be things like a driver's license, an ID card from a federal, state, or local government or a military card that proves identity. And then list C would be something that's proving that they have the authorization to work, like a visa, work visa or birth certificate, something like that. And I don't know if you remember here, I'm going backwards, but you have to put the issuing authority, the document number, and the expiration date for any document that you list on your I-9. All three of those things have to be filled out. So I'm mentioning all of these details because when you're audited, I have a friend who was audited, and like for example, he hired his son and didn't put the full address of the son's on line two, the employer's business. It has the employer's business address. He didn't fill it out completely, and it was a huge fine he ended up with. There were also other little things that were wrong. So, and yeah, again, you would need to cross-check if you're doing an internal audit. You need to cross-check the first day of employment and then today's date. And remember that the date that you fill this out must be within 3 business days of the first day of work. So there's rules about when the employer fills it out and when the employee fills it out. And best is if you just on the very first day of work, you and the employee both fill out all the sections. So um, when you look at documents, you may feel like uncertain, right? Because you're not an immigration attorney. You don't know for sure if a document is accurate or not. So the rule is that you just use the best of your ability to decide if the documents are reasonable and accurate, if the picture looks like the picture of the person. Green cards and California driver's licenses are commonly falsified, so you want to look at them carefully. But if they're reasonable, they appear to be genuine, they relate to the individual presenting the document, you should accept the document. The document should be an original. You can't accept photocopies except for a certified copy of a birth certificate. And most attorneys think that it is better not to keep copies of the documents that you use to fill out the I-9. The only reason you would want to do that is if you're using E-Verify. There's also, supplemental. There's a supplement A if you need a translator or a preparer, someone else to fill it out. There's a supplement B, which is if you're updating the document, like if a work visa expired and you're just making a new date there. There's rules about how to do that. And there's rules about to correct errors. So all of these things, it's all written down. The rules are easy to access. You should just know that there's these re-verification and rules about how to correct errors. So that is our little deep dive for you guys into how to deal with I-9s. And we do have a few minutes that we can do questions if anyone has any about I-9s. And I-9 audits. There's a resource at the end about how to deal with I-9 audits and what to expect. In the past, you would always get a notice of intent in the mail. It would give you 3 days to prepare. California law requires you to tell your employees that an I-9 audit is underway or about to be conducted. Nowadays, the ICE officers are actually coming to the farm to tell people that there's going to be an I-9 audit. And so they have the right to just actually do the I-9 audit immediately. That's why we're really recommending that employers do a little internal audit of their I-9 documents.
Yeah.
In preparation for the possibility. I don't think that they're actually going to be auditing businesses like ours. I think they're mostly auditing farm labor contractors and other larger businesses. But still, I think all of us should be kind of aware of this issue. And if there's questions from before, I see that a lot of questions have come in. Do we have time to answer some of those? Let's see.
Yeah. I think we have time to answer some of the other questions. Um, the question about onboarding, the onboarding doc, but you don't have a staff member identified that is responsible. I think the best practice is to have somebody that's in a position that that it's appropriate to see confidential information. So either an owner or an office, like an admin, if you have one. But I would try and keep that person consistent and have it be somebody that's in a position like that, like that will be allowed to view confidential documents.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's hard in very, very small companies, but in that, if that's the case, then it should be the owner, like the owner of the business.
In terms of this question about health benefits, of course, that's a huge subject area, right? Health benefits. And because we really think that you should consider covered California. But it also is true that recently, because of decisions made in Washington, D.C., the cost for covered California has gone up. So it's not as as it used to be. And I've recently talked to farmers who did look around and find that they could get better health benefits for their business, not, going outside of covered California. But I also want to mention health reimbursement accounts, which have become available as a result really of the Affordable Care Act. And these are not health savings accounts. They're not a type of health insurance. Health reimbursement accounts are a really growing kind of health insurance in which the employer sets up a fund that's kind of like providing a stipend for the employees to give them help them pay for their health insurance. And because it's a recognized type of health account, it goes before taxes. So you're saving payroll taxes for both the employee and the employer. And it's very flexible. The employer can sort of decide a lot about how much the stipend is going to be. It's way better than sort of just setting up a stipend without any official um, process. So it's called if you were looking into this, I see that Justina has asked a question about health benefits. I really recommend that since covered California has become so much more expensive, consider looking into health reimbursement accounts. It's different than a health savings account. It's a health reimbursement account, because that might be something that a small employer could really use. This would be
Should I,
yeah.
yeah, move on? Um, Sorry, let me find my notes here. All right, so now we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of the additional training that is required. Um, so safety training, well, just general training in general. It doesn't have to be super formal or very time consuming. Some of it does as a requirement, but sometimes even just a short conversation at the end of the day, a quick reminder, during check-ins or after their first week, revisiting to revisit tasks when conditions change. It's an important part to remember with any communication to employees regarding training is documentation. Documenting more formal training, like with the IIPP, for example, is really, really important. And documentation, I mean, like the employee name, date that it was completed, um, and so you have a good record. But really any training reminders that you have informal, even it's important to just document those, um, for the purpose if somebody gets hurt and you have over and over and over have, you have record of reminding them about a certain procedure and they continue to hurt themselves, that will work in your favor. So it's really good to just document, any sort of training that you do. Um, the goal is with all training is to prevent injuries, any mistakes and frustration that can arise. Safety training specifically, is make sure that you schedule this for all new hires. It doesn't have to be done on day one, but within the first, couple weeks, it's, really important to have these done. You can spread them out over time, making sure to check in with them after they've been completed to make sure they don't have any questions, and to review some of the more important parts of the training. Um, so even if you have one employee, you are required to have a written illness and injury prevention plan, or IIPP. You'll hear it being called, or the heat illness prevention plan, HIPP, which is really important, obviously, in agriculture. Um, Heat illness training should happen as soon as temperatures reach, the 80s, and others should happen, more immediately upon hire. Um, Other trainings can wait until an employee is actually using like equipment. So for example, forklift training, if they're not, going to be using that for until like month 3, you don't need to get that done right away. Just make sure that it's completed prior to them, learning, that new skill. And also safety training is ongoing. It's constant. You have to do it. There's requirements, obviously, but do it as much as necessary. If you're noticing that there's injuries happening or things aren't being done correctly, do another training and document it. Just make sure that they're being done as, as needed. Um, and this, I added these couple slides. It's not necessarily related to onboarding, but it's related to training. Um, they're directly tied to the importance of training. OSHA logs track work-related injuries and illnesses. So like I said, if you're noticing patterns in these logs, you can then kind of improve your training to help kind of decrease some of those injuries that are happening. Um, Also, if you are having a lot of, back injuries, for example, when I was working at an organic farm managing this, we had a lot of back injuries and it caused our workers' comp insurance to skyrocket. Like it increased by so much. And so one way to limit that is to make sure that your training is, um, kept up, you're making sure you're training on the right things, and keeping these logs up to date. There's 3 different logs. So the OSHA 300, is the log for recording injuries and illnesses. The OSHA 300A is the annual summary, and this one has to be posted each year in the workplace. And then the OSHA 301 is the incident report with details about each case. And it is a requirement to have these for every year kept together um, with your other training, documents. So an injury or illness is recordable if it involves medical treatment beyond first aid, loss or restricted work time, loss of consciousness, or work-related medical diagnosis. Um, Employees should report work-related injuries and safety concerns promptly and without fear of retaliation. And they may request access to applicable OSHA records as allowed by by OSHA. Um, I would make sure that they are aware of how to report these injuries and illnesses as well. And I'll cover that when I go over workers' comp. So workplace violence prevention is a newer California law that was took place in, I believe, June of 2024. So it covers like physical assaults, threats, verbal or written, harassment, intimidation from customers or coworkers or any outsiders. And this includes also domestic violence incidences that spill into the workplace. Um, so California now requires employers with at least, so if your workplace is accessible to the public and you have at least one employee, you're required to have a workplace violence prevention plan. If you have 10 or more employees at any time at a location, but you don't have access, it doesn't have access to the public, then that's when you would need to do a workplace violence prevention plan. It can be a little intimidating, especially for brand new California laws, but for small farms, it's mostly documentation and just some planning. And having plans like this in place means that you're prepared and thoughtful about employee safety. There are templates and there's guidance available, so you don't have to start from zero with this one. So sexual harassment prevention training. It says 5 or more employees that's when it's required. I recommend it for if you even have one employee. I think it's important to have anybody that's in a manager position, owner. I think you shouldn't, it's free. It takes 2 hours every 2 years for a manager and 1 hour every 2 years for employees. I really encourage you to do this, even if you don't have 5 employees. Because it doesn't just cover, the sexual harassment that you kind of think of. It talks about bullying, and what are the other ones? Like bullying. What else does it cover? Like spacing. Yeah, I mean physical. But yeah, it covers a lot more than just what you kind of, typically think of. So yeah, non-supervisors every 1 hour for every year, for every 2 years, and then supervisors, it's 2 hours every 2 years. And it needs to be completed within 6 months of hire. And there are free online options. They're through the state of California. They offer this free and in all languages. And it's good to have this record, track employees, the date they completed it, when they're due, so that you stay up on their training. Workers' comp. So all California employers must have workers' comp insurance if they have employees, even part-time employees. Not having workers' comp when required is considered a criminal offense. So this is a really important one to have. And it's for the safety of you and your employees. Certain owners can choose whether or not to be included or excluded, but employees must be covered. And sharing your business's worker comp policy and how to file a claim with new hires is really important. You can kind of put together a packet. There's certain forms. I forget, it's like DE. I forget the name of that form. Judith, do you remember the name of that form? It's like DE 30, so I can't remember.
Something like that. I don't, it's in the packet. So
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
the
it's in
DE is
it's
enough
in
for
the
people to get to it. That's all you need to
okay.
know.
Okay, great. But yeah, just having all of that information kind of ready to go and kind of what you need to do as an employer, having that ready is really important. Because when somebody's injured, that's the last thing you're thinking of, but it's really important to have that paperwork done. So workers' comp, it protects both the employee and the employer from consequences of job-related injury or illness. And ag is one of those industries with the highest rate of claims, which makes coverage especially important here. And also thing to note is it's separate from health insurance and it's designed specifically for work-related issues. Like you've probably heard like when you go to the doctor for something, they'll ask, was this work related? Because it's handled separately than yeah, than non-work related. Um, so what does workers' comp cover? So it covers lost wages, temporary or permanent disability, retraining, medical expenses related to work injuries. It can also provide benefits to dependents if a worker dies from a work-related injury. And unlike regular health insurance, there's no deductible at all. And most claims are pretty straightforward and resolved fairly quickly, um, especially if you've got all your documents filled out and everything filed correctly. That's it. Any questions on that section?
Yep, you can just put your questions in the chat.
And yes, yeah, thank you, Judith, for mentioning the OSHA logs are only required if you have 10 or more.
Yeah, the sexual harassment link.
Is that in the
I
resources?
don't think that is in the resources
I
because
can I can find it and share it in the link right now.
perfect. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure my workers' comp provider has a link. Like you might check with whoever you're using to see if they have something for you there. And there was a few other trainings that I could provide for free through my workers' comp provider.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great question or something to think about when you're looking for a workers' comp provider. If you're a new employer, is find out what kind of resources they have and that they will share with you. They may even come to your place and do a forklift training, for example, or
Yeah,
something. So there's a lot that the workers' comp provider should be able to provide.
there's the link right there. So you click on that link, there's some instructions, says continue, and then you choose the language. What I used to do is I would set up the employee with the computer and then let them go through this part. Um, one thing to note is you have to finish this in one sitting. If you stop and walk away for too long, it'll time out and then you've got to start it all over again. So good thing to um, make sure to inform people of and to download their certificate because that's also the documentation you need to prove that they've done the training. And you can do both English or the non-supervisory and the supervisory course here.
Crystal, what about for people like me who hire seasonally and don't have people that always come back year to year?
I think, I mean, I may be overly like, I may, I don't know that word, like overly not cautious, but
That's
I
fine.
would recommend do it for everybody.
Yeah.
It can happen in 5 minutes of employment. It can
Hmm.
happen it can never happen. You never know. But I think it's information that everybody should know, whether you are an employee, employer, or not. Like it's really valuable information. It's just really on respect and yeah.
Yeah. And you may if you're a lot of times on farm there's crews that are maybe mixed gender crews that are working remotely, right? And or they might be working without a lot of supervision or something, and I think those are situations where we've seen unfortunately issues come up. And if there's a lot of research that has happened that has showed that especially women in agriculture feel like they face problems around this sexual harassment
Yeah.
pretty frequently.
Yeah. And I just think for a long time, it was not like talked about. And I think the more we normalize it and the more we talk about it and give people the space to, know where to go to report, how to report, what to report, that's another one. Like most people are like, oh, well, he didn't even touch me or anything, or they didn't even touch me. There's so many different reasons why, or ways that, you know, that things that are classified as harassment. I just think it's important to do for everybody. And I don't know if I mentioned, I think even for the supervisory one, it's not just for somebody who supervises employees. I think, like myself, I do not supervise anybody, but I do the supervisory one because I interact with everybody within the organization. Anybody in finance, anybody that has any sort of like authority over pay or anything like that, I think they should automatically do the supervisory one, even if they don't supervise people. I think it's really just anybody in a position, um, like a specific position should take it, the 2 hour one.
Yeah, thanks for your question on that. That's a good one. Angela, thank you.
I'm
All
seeing
right.
two things. So there's the chat and then there's the Q&A. And I tried to answer something for Amy in the Q&A section, but Amy, I don't know if you
Oh,
can see that. Um,
Oh yeah, thank you.
I
yeah,
didn't even notice
I don't know if
that.
you want
I
to,
didn't see the Q&A. Thank you so much,
yeah,
Courtney.
I'm not
Yeah.
clear how it works, but
Um, yeah, I see
I
a
just run through
question,
this.
the question in there about why do you recommend keeping? It's actually not really a recommendation, it's a requirement. You cannot keep I-9s with personnel files because personnel files can be reviewed by a manager, and I-9s are one of the more like confidential documents, so you keep those totally separate. They can be in the same file cabinet, but they just need to be separate from those files. Personnel files are for onboarding documents, training confirmation, certificates, things like that.
And does it have to be a locked file? I don't remember that.
Yes,
It
all of
does.
that should be
Okay.
locked. Yeah, because it's got social security numbers, it's got,
Yeah.
very confidential information, addresses.
Hmm.
It's also fully compliant to keep I-9s electronically if you have a way to do that safely. So that's another possibility. And I find sometimes that I'm much better organizing my stuff on a computer than I am in paper forms.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, there were yeah, so in the Q&A, there's a couple other questions like Amy's question, what is this employee handbook?
I figured I just pulled while we were chatting here, I pulled up the table of contents for mine. And so when I'm into my slides, I'll just share that. But basically it's just like it's individual to every business, but it's gonna be like your roadmap for your employment relationship with you as an employer and your employees as how you relate. And you'll have specific policies to your farm or operation that you'll want to outline and just make sure it's all been said and it's all documented. And then you'll keep an acknowledgement that they've read it, and you might go over that together in an orientation, or you might just make sure they've read it before they start their first day, however you choose. But I'll show mine when I'm in my slides.
Yeah, and then I just did like a simple kind of Google like top 5 California requirements to have in your employee handbook. And it's like at will employment statement, anti-harassment, discrimination, and retaliation policy, paid sick leave information, the different leaves of absences that are required in California, your wage and hour policies. So I would start with those and then some of the more specifics to your organization, and then kind of build on that.
Yeah. Then there's another question about when we say hiring program, if we were talking about like a computer program, I think is the question, and Square was mentioned.
Yeah, it's like an HRIS system, like paychecks, anything like they're usually that's considered like where you would do your payroll. sometimes. We use like UKG is another one, though. I mean, some of those are sometimes for bigger organizations.
Or Gusto or QuickBooks payroll.
QuickBooks, yeah,
Yeah.
I've used when I worked for the farm, we used QuickBooks. So they just kind of process your payroll, but they also keep all that important, the tax documents and things like that that are required for making sure your employees are paid accurately. And sometimes, they're like the more robust ones you can, keep training documents and that's where they go in and request time off and stuff like that. But when you're really small, sometimes those are a little too much. You don't need those.
I'll say like I started out doing like with the help of my bookkeeper doing payroll by myself through QuickBooks, and it just became a little cumbersome, and I decided my time was better spent in the field, and I started using Gusto, and they do take care of, you have to do an individual payment for so many different types um of the taxes. Like the payroll taxes are made up of through many different entities, and so sending each individual check in small amounts just got a little crazy for me. And so Gusto takes care of that, and then also the new hire paperwork. So I felt like it was worth the monthly fee for me to do it through a payroll provider like that. And if you're really small and just have one and two employees, maybe you'd be fine just doing it through QuickBooks. But getting some help from a bookkeeper or someone like an accountant to help you make sure you're not missing anything would be a good idea.
I was just looking at a question
Oh,
in the chat. Sophia asked about turning in I-9s, and as an employee, I think is was her question. Your employer should have asked you to fill that section 1 out and turn it in on the first day of your work. So if you found it um, in later on, then hopefully your employer should figure out that they need to get their I-9s on in their file soon.
yeah. Um, I think we only have about 10 minutes left
Cool.
until the session is over. Should we maybe move on?
I'll go ahead and share my screen then. And let's see here.
I think it does go till 2:40 or 2:45. I think we have plenty of time.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
If we're ready.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Let's see.
Slideshow over on the right.
Next to share.
Which right?
The right
The
of your
blue share
screen next to
button,
that.
there
There
it
you
is.
go.
There you
There
go.
you go.
Thank you. Thought I had it already. So we decided amongst the three of us when we were talking that Judith and Crystal would talk more about like nuts and bolts, and I would talk a little bit more about feelings. And the very first slide that Judith shared, which talks about what makes a good job, um, a lot has to do with the culture of the workplace. And like we were saying, like you probably are going to start if you haven't started hiring yet, like you'll probably start with a lower tier wage. And like, why would that be attractive to someone? There's a lot of reasons why people are drawn to farming, and kind of figuring out what people are looking for and meeting them where they're at and seeing how you can be a great place to work is a good place to start. So I come from kind of a unique employee background. Like my first job I had at the age of 15, and I kept till I was 25. And I worked in the summers as a lifeguard. And the reason I came back every year was because of our culture. We just had such a tight knit team, and I really truly grew up there. Became an adult working there, and I've always, since becoming an employer, tried to recreate those feelings of really clear boundaries between employer and employees, and of a very high degree of customer service and professionality, and a focus on safety while also having fun and making it like a great place to come and be every day. So I figured I would talk a little bit about that, and I will also share my employee handbook. But I just wanted to say, yeah, I learned so much through the Employment Resiliator from California FarmLink. And I did make my employee handbook as an incentive, like a homework assignment, basically, in the class, and got additional help in like vetting it and making sure all the language was correct and proper through the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center. So highly recommend reaching out to both organizations to learn more about being not just a legal and good employer, but being great. So yeah, you'll be able to get the slides that we're sharing on Shed as well. So yeah, talking about the handbook and just how it really sets the tone for your work culture. It should be, formal language, but the first page of mine has like a picture of me and the text just says, "Let's work together." And that's really how I view it. I don't like it when people call me their boss. I'm like, we work together. We're doing this as a team. That's the kind of community and teamwork that I want to create at my workplace. But there is a delineation of roles, and you are, as the employer, steering the ship in that sense. And so creating this handbook and really outlining the policies and what's okay and what's not okay just leaves nothing unsaid if you do it well. And even if it seems like it would never get there, it's just good to have said it and made sure that um, the ground rules are all established. So I update mine every year and I go over it with employees once we're all on board. Like sometimes I'll have students from the local university that start later than people who aren't students just because of their work schedule. And then I really don't need as much help in the early part of the season as I do in like July and August and September. So once we're all together, we'll do an employee orientation and I'll have it catered and have lunch and we go over this and we also do some like just getting to know you kind of fun stuff. Um, but it's a great way to lay the foundation. And then I've also set up like a Google like meeting link that employees can use whenever they want to talk to me about something. So setting up regular check-ins is good, which is in the onboarding packets that have been shared earlier in this presentation, but also just making yourself available for if something comes up and people might not feel comfortable pulling you aside during the workday, they can kind of like book time with me. So maybe what I'll do I'll come back at the end so I don't have to like switch screens, but I'll show you my table of contents in my handbook just so you can see it. Um, I wanted to share a poem. I said it was going to be more touchy-feely, but this is something that I feel is part of what makes a farm job what it is. It's this idea of the last line of this poem, which says, "The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real." And farming is real work, and it's really hard, but it's really rewarding. And yeah, our bodies are made for work. So setting the tone in that way, and like really honoring that it's really special and it's really cool that we get to do it together. Uh, is is something that I like to share with my employees and how I like to look at farm work as a great job. So I don't think I need to read that to you, but it's there for you to enjoy. Let's see. And then your culture, this is a little photo. We just on a whim decided to have a picnic one day because it was a beautiful day. This was after work hours, but the farm is like inland from the coast, and there's just this local park with it's very underused, and there's a picnic table and barbecue pit. So we picked up some things to make a little meal and just had like a great little evening. And every once in a while, I feel like it's good to punctuate the season with little things that are totally not farm related and just for team building. I think that makes coming to work a lot more fun. And it's definitely a lot of like when I was lifeguarding, what we did outside of work was just fun things to get us all together and make us a really good team when we are working. Um, so yeah, your culture in your place of work is related to the values you want to embody in your business and the ways you define success. So that can look a lot of different ways. That can look like quality of life versus just the paycheck or just the benefits or things like that. And sometimes I feel like it's helpful to share like the why behind what we're doing. Um, Going back to that poem or going back to like just the feelings that we have when we're working together and just acknowledging that like at the end of the day, we're all just helping each other in one way or another. You as the employer are helping people pay their bills and have their health insurance or have their retirement or whatever it is. And they're helping you move your business forward. And no one's going to have the same drive as you. Like, no one's going to probably work harder than you would or care as much, but they're there for their own reasons and you're there together. And so finding that common ground and just like staying right in that sweet spot is, I think, the ideal. Um, and just yeah, being thankful and grateful to everyone who makes it all move forward. Um,
Brittany, I think we might have less time than we thought. So I
oh,
think that the
okay.
session ends pretty soon here.
Okay. Well, then why don't I
I'm
just go
so
ahead?
sorry.
No, no, that's okay. I'll go ahead and just share that table of contents so people can screen grab it if they want to. And then that is, I think, some of the things on here we've pretty much talked about already. Um, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to stop this share and just share my handbook really quickly. And if anyone has questions coming up, oh, someone asked how many employees I have. At the peak of the season, it's just 5. They also have that are on payroll, and then I have my CPA and bookkeeper that are on retainers. So they're not like on my payroll, but they're people that help my business that are paid, if that makes any sense. Um, okay, let me just share. Mm, Sorry, here we go. Okay, so here's like what the handbook looks like. And like I said, the first page is like, let's work together and a nice little note for me. And then if anyone just wants to copy, like screenshot this, um, that could be a little bit of an outline. But again, it's everyone's going to make their own and they're going to be individual to every business. But I just wanted to put that up.
Thank you for sharing that, Courtney.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll just open it back up to any questions and thank you all for listening.
Well,
Is it all right if I take it down now? Does everyone said
yep,
everyone has a chair?
yep, we are at time.
Okay.
So just want to say huge thanks to the three of you for coming in and sharing this information. I think it's been super valuable and insightful for me. And I hope that the farmers and business owners and perhaps employees as well out there listening gained as much as I did. So really appreciate it. And this is being recorded, so we'll toss it up onto our YouTube channel. So if you know anybody else who might be in need of some of this advice, please pass along the link to them. We'll follow up and some follow-up emails for all conference attendees. So stay tuned for the next workshop here at the California Small Farm Conference. And with that, thank you all for joining us. We will see you soon.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Evan. Sorry, Courtney.
Oh no, that's okay. I felt
know,
like
I
we
was
covered everything we
I
needed
think
to.
we had a different time or something for some reason. I thought, and so you got cut off a little bit.
That's totally okay. I think we covered everything we needed to.
Well, and they have the slides as well. So.
Yeah.
Here.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you all.